Good evening. Welcome to the program. This is a Thursday night edition of the Buddy Martin Show. It's a Gator Collective Corner, as we do every Thursday night, except tonight, no Ben Troop and Franz Beard. It's just me. And as a matter of fact, a full confession, while you're watching this, I'm just winding up my speech at the Fighting Gator Touchdown Club in Gainesville. So we pre-recorded this. But boy, do we have a show for you tonight. So stay tuned. You're going to love it. The Buddy Martin Show is about to be on the air.
Yes, it's time again for Buddy Martin. Call him up and tell him what you're thinking. But be kind because he's doing the best he can.
Better, stronger, faster.
Mama says that alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth but no toothbrush.
Hey, what if the voice calls while you're gone?
Take a message.
Bye.
You ready, champ?
I'm ready for this my whole life.
I'm incapable of small talk. But that's why you love me, right?
Kind of intimidating to be in the presence of so many great athletes.
Good evening and welcome to the program, Buddy Martin Show, heard Monday through Thursday right here on this network. We're glad you could be with us tonight. As always, appreciate your support very much, as a matter of fact. As we do our sponsors, always like to mention them, Meldon Law, where you matter most. Red Star Medical Research, seeking tomorrow's answers to the health questions of today. Of course, Main Street Community Bank, you see the big green M, that's them. And our Grow Tower people who we're having a lot of conversations with. You folks seem to be liking this idea of me being a farmer. Tell you all about that. And as I said earlier, we will be in tonight in Gainesville with the Florida Gator Touchdown, Fighting Gator Touchdown Club, and talking about a lot of things, including the subject that you're probably going to get sick of me talking about. But I do love it, and I'm going to preach it as much as I can. And that is the loyalty clause, the loyalty pledge for our Orange and Blue Bloods, which we're working on right now. It's a work in progress. We'll tell you how you can get involved in it. And the theory behind it is simply take back college football one school at a time, one fan at a time. Because I do believe college football belongs to the fans. But who knew? Because they've got no voice anymore. We all know about the issues. We all know about the transfer portal, some good things about it. We all know about NIL, which we like, when it's handled by proper people like Gator Collective, etc. But there needs to be some ownership, and fans have got to speak up, be counted, and we'll tell you all about how to do that. We'll tell you every night. Also, we're looking for a little help from you before we get there, I guess. The Drive to 10K. Please help us become an elite show on Facebook by liking the Buddy Martin Show page as much as you can, because once we get to 10,000 followers, we're only less than 900 away, we have a new status as an elite show on Facebook Live, so we would appreciate that as well. So you're going to like this guy. I have a column in the current upcoming tonight edition of Gator Bait about the guy who is the new voice of the Florida Gators. I had a long interview with him, which we hit tonight. I wrote a column about him, and I think you're going to like this guy, but let's let him earn it, and he's willing to do that. So, meanwhile, we'll step aside, and we'll hear from our title sponsor of the program, Meldon Law, where you matter most, and Jeffrey Meldon. Well, it's been a while, but the boss is back. He looks a little older than the last time we had a Meldon on, but he looks good because, you know what? He's had a great summer, I know. Boy, the travels you took, Jeffrey Meldon, you had a trip or two.
Well, the best time was I went to Aspen, Colorado, and got to spend a couple weeks there with my grandchildren, my daughter, son-in-law, my lovely wife, Patricia, brothers. It was a whole family deal. And I'll tell you, when I came to Gainesville, everybody told me that during the summer it's hot as hell, and you need to either go to the beach or go to North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And I think since that time, a lot of Floridians have also discovered Colorado.
Yes, and that's a beautiful place. I lived there 17 years. Do they still have the statue of me in downtown Aspen?
Yes, yeah, yeah. Buddy Martin stood here.
Well, that sounds great. And I know you enjoyed your time and well deserved. Well, a lot of things have happened. Let's talk about a couple. Here, well, they're in it now, I think. It's about the new Heaven Football Complex is quite the place. $85 million. Dollars. I know you've had some knowledge of it and maybe even been in it. I haven't, but it's finally the state of the art facility that Gators and Gator fans and players and coaches have been wanting.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we were actually behind the eight ball on that deal because Georgia and Alabama and everybody else, had those really cool facilities, and we didn't. And recruits like shiny objects, and it's kind of state of the art weight room. The coaches have brand new offices. They've got cafeterias in there with fabulous food. Not only that, buddy, they even have a barber shop in there.
I heard. Yeah, and I think they're going to have a river too. But well, you're right. It's something it's something you have to have today, and it will put you behind if you don't. I can't wait to get in and see it. Sounds like they're back on track, and Gator Sports is on the way. Yes, sir. Jeffrey Melton staying on top of it. Melton Law, the only official injury law firm of the Florida Gators. And thank you for that, Jeffrey. All right, coming up, we've got a guy here that we're going to enjoy listening to over the years to come. And I enjoyed my interview with him. I'll let you judge for yourself. Sean Kelley grew up in St. Louis. He came to New Orleans eventually, where he did a lot of stuff, including NBA, including Major League Baseball, including he was a lead voice on ESPN radio for college football. He did some Pelican play-by-play stuff. And when he came to Florida, a lot of people were shocked that they were able to get him out of there because he was quite a popular figure and a well-respected man. So we sat down with Sean Kelley and had this visit and see what you think. And we'll be back in a minute to tell you about all the other things we got going on. My great pleasure to welcome to the Buddy Martin Show for the first time the voice of the Florida Gators. It says it right there in the graphic. He is the voice of the Gators. He's on the job now. We're all excited to learn a lot about Sean Kelley, who, by all estimations and projections and reactions I've got, is a home run for the Florida Gators. And welcome to the program. Welcome to the show, and welcome to the Gator Nation, Sean.
Well, buddy, thank you for the gracious welcome. That's certainly been the case with most everybody I've been around in Gainesville since arriving, and you're certainly at the top of that list. And we'll see about the home run. I've yet to see a pitch, so I look good in the batter's box probably, but let's see what happens when the pitch comes across.
You do look good in the batter's box, and I'm confident that you'll stroke that baseball just like you do everything else. And let me get right to the story, because here I had a bunch of questions this week. I was on Shane Matthews' show. Of course, he's your partner in the broadcast booth. We talked about a variety of topics, and one of them was, who's Sean Kelley? Now, we kind of know the Wikipedia and all that sort of stuff, and we're not going to try to deep dive too much, but I want to know, if I say to you, who is Sean Kelley? Who is Sean Kelley?
A guy who loves sports, who loves radio, and loves being a part of a team. And that's kind of part of the reason why I'm now in Gainesville, Florida, is this desire to be, again, part of something, be a part of the community, be a part of a particular team's journey. I love that process. I am, I guess, squared away enough to know my role in that process. So if it's being a link between the fans and that team, or an outlet for the stories about those young men and their coaches to come out, then I'm all in. And so I grew up in a big time sports town in St. Louis that's been blessed for decades with tremendous broadcasters. And so the connection with those teams in the town that I grew up in, and that connection is such because of those broadcasters. I think that's what inspired me or led me toward this profession.
Well, I want to get to that story, but before we go any further, I go back to seeing those Cardinals way back about Abner Doubleday's time, and I used to listen when I was a kid. I'd crawl up the pine tree and I'd take an antenna with me, my dad's big Zenith radio, and I would dial in KMOX St. Louis and hear Harry Carey. People forget Harry Carey was the play-by-play guy for the Cardinals, and my hero was Stan Musial. So that's how far back I go. And I love all that stuff. Let me just ask you, growing up, who was your favorite Cardinal?
Wow, it's kind of a loaded question because I came in an era where, as a fan, where we had kind of departed from the Bob Gibson, Stan Musial area, and there were some dark days there in the '70s for the St. Louis Cardinals. In fact,
there were.
I remember asking Jack Buck when I got to know him very early in my career. I said, Jack, what was it like calling those games in the '70s? I mean, you had the World Championships in the '60s, and you had the legendary players, and then there was this dark time. And he said, sometimes you just got to be better than the team. And it was something I took to heart, and it served me well over some years with some rough seasons. But, really, I think, buddy, if I'm being honest about my favorite Cardinal or my favorite time, is that when I was 10 years old in 1982, the Cardinals won the World Series. And Whitey Herzog was the manager, and that era of Cardinal baseball started and flourished basically for the rest of the decade. But I think, for guys like you and me, buddy, it's hard to remember this, but 10, 11, 12, right around there, that's a magical age for a boy. Everything is, you're old enough to be aware of what's going on. You're still somewhat naive or enough to where things are magical in a sense. And so whether it be those Cardinals teams that had, Ozzie Smith, Willie McGee, Keith Hernandez, for that particular run, I could probably name all 9 starters of that 82 team from when I was 10 years old. But Ozzie Smith was such a presence, not only on that team, but in the community. He'd be on that list. You had guys like Vince Coleman who turned that 85 team into basically, the run and gun version of Major League Baseball. They played in that big park on that hard AstroTurf, and they just banged it around the yard and ran. And so whether it be Gold Glove defenders or, base stealing thieves, those were the Cardinals of my childhood. And that collection of players is probably whom I revere the most, growing up.
You're absolutely right about the 10 and 12-year-old. My connection to Gator football goes back to when I was 10 years old. And in Ocala, I listened to the games on the radio, and I would put on my old green moth-eaten sweater, like it was a jersey, put washcloths under my shoulders, and run around the house stiff-arming chairs while Otis Boggs did the play-by-play.
Right.
So, yeah.
And those announcers, and it continued obviously, with David Steele and then Mick for 33 years. There's that romantic connection that we still find with radio. And we don't necessarily, and buddy, you're a newspaper guy and a legend of that business. We don't necessarily pour over the box scores each morning at the table with the newspaper like we used to. And I'm also aware enough to know that, like, my 22-year-old son he's not consuming Florida Gator football on the radio in the same way that we did, but yet it's still there. It's still viable. I think that radio in a lot of ways is going to be an easier trampoline into the digital media realm and social media than some of the other media outlets. And so can I, as the new voice of the Gators, stand on the foundation set by Mick and David and Otis and everybody else? It's a short list going back to 1940, but can I be the voice of the Gators in a new way as well, in connecting with those fans? And so, you mentioned KMOX. That's, for those who don't remember or are younger than you and I are, at one time in this country, we still do, but it's not as prominent. We had this 50,000 watt clear channel AM station network across the country it was built in that way for military purposes and for national security. But what it meant is that at night when the sun went down, everybody but those stations had to power down, and stations like KMOX and KOA and San Antonio, and they're around the country. WGN in Chicago, these super stations had the ability to broadcast, and I'm not exaggerating here. You could hear KMOX at night in nearly 38 states if the weather was right.
Yeah,
and
KOA
like
Denver was the same way. I know WWL
KOA
was
in
the
Denver,
same way. WTSB was that way, and that's what I grew up on.
Yes, and so that's why those teams with those games on those channels, those stations, grew a kind of a national audience because, like you said, you could find a way to get the antenna, just right and everything else, and you could pick up a Cardinal game in North Florida, or even out in Western Oklahoma. And so those days are gone, except for the fact that thanks to this, you can get the radio broadcast or the TV or whatever anywhere you are, depending on which app you have or whatnot. So all those things, I think, make me as optimistic about what my new role will be at Florida and the future of how we consume games, even in an old school way.
Yeah, and I love that, and I want to get to a point that you didn't take a broadcasting job. You already had a great broadcasting job. You were one of the voices of college football and the Pelicans, and I've done some research on you, and I've gotten responses back from your friends out in Louisiana thinking, wow, you were lucky to get that guy. Now you have to prove it because you have to not only you have to replace a semi-legend in McHubert, and it took him 4 years before you really got any gravitas with the fans. On that one call, Dorian got a touchdown, which I'm sure you know all about. And the other point I want to make is that you come here at a time when we've had a clean sweep. New head coach in basketball, new coach in football, relatively new AD, and now replacing McHubert as a new voice of the Gators. It's not just a broadcasting job. To many, you are the heart and soul of Gator football. Although every game, you're not on television, but they want to hear you. You're their guy. They want them to be able to. You're their John. You're their Walter Cronkite. That's all I'm gonna say. You're the guy that they want to know. I can believe it as Sean says it. Now you're coming into this as not just an announcer, which you proved yourself on, but you've also got to get a buy-in from the fans. I know you know that.
Yeah, and that process can't be forced, buddy. It has to be organic, much like Mick's situation with the Doring touchdown. Those touchstones have to present themselves organically. So I can't go into September 3rd, with a catchphrase or a pre-scripted anything other than welcoming Gator fans back to another chapter in this storied history. And look, you can't fake it. There's got to be something genuine there that I can't walk in. I'm not going to be Mick Hubert. I'm not going to be the historian on Florida Gator athletics as you are. But it sure is going to help to have Shane Matthews, who steps into that booth full time as a member of one particular era. Tate's down on the sidelines. He represents a more recent era of Gator football. And then you have me, kind of the new kid at school. But the one thing I do want to, not necessarily force, but I want to, I guess, establish early is that I'm hoping that Gator Nation will see me as one of their own quickly, because that goes back to that trust thing that you were talking about, having their guy in that booth calling their team's games. Now, that doesn't mean that every call is against the Gators, and that doesn't mean that I can't say it's just not the Gators' day, all those things. But I don't think there'll be any doubt as to it being a Florida broadcast.
Well, there is that part of it, and you can get a little uncomfortable if you're a journalist and you're an objective broadcaster, which you have been. You're well known for that. But again, here's the thing. I think there's something that I wanted to say to you to get your thoughts. And before, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I wanted to say We know college football is kind of on a cliff right now. And we know that NIL and we know that transfer portal have really disrupted this game we know and love so much. Some of it for the better, some of it not. It's really scary. So I've been asking a question all week about this. What do we do about this? And I asked this simple question: who owns college football? Who owns college football? It's my theme all week, both on my show and speaking to the Fight Gators Touchdown Club, asking a question: who owns college football? Because when you can say that, you begin to say, okay, if you are in ownership, then you have a responsibility to do what? Be loyal to it, show loyalty, represent your team. Doesn't mean you can't say they stink. Doesn't mean you say they made a bad call. But basically, the fans own college football, or should. And
Well,
it's not the network, it's not the university, it's not the coaches, it's not the player, it's the fans. That's my opinion. Your thoughts?
well, I think it's. I agree with you about the fans. I kind of look at it right now as a three-legged stool. Okay, so the three legs of the stool would be A, the fans, B, the television networks, and C, the university presidents. Okay, and just remember that all three of these legs on this stool represent the business of college football. Let's not forget that this is a business. It's wildly entertaining. It's woven into the fabric of our culture, especially down here in the South. But no stool can stand without all legs functioning properly. Now, the ultimate decider goes back to your point about the fans. It's the consumer and the business that drives the health of the industry. So if the university presidents or the television networks get out of whack in some way, it will affect how and how much the consumer will participate in this three-headed monster. So grow the game, obviously, keep the integrity of the game, but be aware of the business model and what the consumer wants. And so where is that balance? I don't know. If you want to use the analogy that you just used about the edge of the cliff, I don't want to be overly dramatic and say that on one hand it can end up in a pile of blood and broken bones, and at the other end of the spectrum, the sail comes out and we go soaring off the cliff to new heights. So where are we? Hopefully more toward the soaring than the falling, but I don't think it's one extreme or the other. I think that the NIL thing will have to play itself through. It wasn't too long ago I was like a lot of college football fans and said, hey, look, this is, it's college football. We shouldn't be playing the players. It's a part of our tradition. It's what separates it from pro sports. But at the same time, when you look, buddy, at the amount of money that is involved now with college football, the fact that each of these SEC teams is going to get $68 million right off the top and 24 from the television networks, let's not forget that these young men are what drive the product on the field. So where's their share? What's fair in that situation? So is NIL the vehicle for that? Perhaps here in the short term. Is it a mix then of perhaps we come up with some kind of a better stipend or salary, or I don't know. I mean, we're heading in the direction that they need to be compensated fairly. The transfer portal probably needs some more governance in this sport right now. If it's me and I'm trying to predict the future, I think I'm pretty well secure in the fact that we're going to have probably like 3 super conferences. I want to avoid the NFL model of like AFC, NFC. So let's say we have 3 super conferences, but I think at the end of the day, and some of this goes to my experience, my long experience with the NBA and whatnot, would Greg Sankey end up being kind of a czar of college football? We need some kind of a commissioner or central command if this is where we're heading and there's this much money involved. That's a very long answer to your question, but that's kind of my take on where we are and where it could go.
Can't disagree with anything you said. I think it's a good thing the players are getting some compensation. They should have gotten it a long time ago, when Steve Spurrier threw his wallet on the table at the SEC meeting in Destin and said, "We can all afford to pay our own players out of our salary. I want your name. I want you to sign this document, and I'm going to take the copy and I'm going to give it to the press. If you don't sign it, I'm going to tell them." So
yeah,
and that was cost of attendance. Yeah.
pretty smart move by the HBC.
Yeah.
That he made sure that he was going to let every potential recruit in the country, know where everybody stood in his conference. So he was totally right, and he was also very strategic in how he went about it.
Exactly. So, just a final point on that, and I want to get to the statues, which I noticed you visited already. Yeah. Think about this though. If you go back to the model of, let's just say, politics or the church, okay? There's something they do in politics, or they state their conviction. If they're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, they take a stand and say, "This is who I am, and this is what I'm about, and this is my value system." In church, they have things like where you profess your faith. Even though you're already a born again or whatever you are, if you're Jewish, you go to church and they have living down south, what they do, they have an old fashioned rally and they get people to look up and say, "Hey, yeah, I want to reconfirm my beliefs," and you have that going. And so I think what we need in a way is for fans to say, okay, you can't do it for everybody. You do it for your school, right? What is the value? What are you willing to support? When you put your foot in the ground and say, I am, let's say, a Gator, and I pledge to commit to be there in all kinds of weather, which, by the way, it's a pretty prophetic statement if you think about it. When you think of what is it, it is what we're talking about. And this is the loyalty the programs need and ownership. And by the way, loyalty needs to come the other way. In my opinion, that's one model. Will it work? I have no idea. Will people do it? I have no idea. But to me, right now, we need loyalty in the game.
Right, both business wise and emotionally.
Right.
I think those are two distinct things. So, especially at the cost of coming to a game these days, or the cost of buying a certain package on your smart TV now, all those things. And so, I put down this amount of money. I want to have this kind of a product, or this is my school. These are the colors that I wear. Although I don't have the bright orange on today, I want to make that clear. That was totally off the topic. Anyway, there's a give and take as you described it, certainly. And the higher the commitment, the more the expectation, obviously. And at the end of the day, I think we also know that there's that emotional tie-in. I went to the University of Florida. My father went to Florida. Or I live in Gainesville, my job is with the university. All those things tie in. And so, therefore, when you are emotionally invested in something, you want a team to represent your values. And when the Gators, which is a national brand, when they go out and about, you want to feel good about those young men or those young women identifying in a way that you would be proud. And then there's the bottom line, and I kind of buried the lead on this, to use a newspaper topic. Win. Yeah. I mean, we all want to have a winner, and loyalty is something that is to be present, win or lose. I get it, and that's the true definition of loyalty. But at the same time, who doesn't want to have a winner? And so that goes back to the expectation, both financially, but here in the emotional sense as well.
For sure. You mentioned the HBC. I saw your clips. I saw you visited the statues. And I do a column about every other year where I go and talk to them because, I saw them all play, them all, and have a chat with them. It's remarkable to have three players like that. It's starting to become a bigger thing than I ever thought it would. And now, standing out there looking at those guys. Let's just take Spurrier. I would say very few people, maybe Archie Manning and a few others, have the status in college football at their alma mater like Steve Spurrier. You know this, who not only was a great player, I was there the day he kicked the field goal that won the game against Auburn, which won him the Heisman Trophy. And of course, we all know he came back and won the first national championship, and now he's back as ambassador and his restaurant, which is pretty darn good. So, having said all that, I'm not going to ask you to sum up Steve Spurrier's career, but when you met him the first time, what did you think, and have you been to his restaurant?
yes and yes. I'll tell you just a brief story about just getting to meet him here and share time with him recently. In that, whether it be reading your work or all that's been chronicled about Steve Spurrier, one of the things that strikes you when you're with him is a his awareness of you, his attention toward you, and then also the thing that just almost not so subtly jumps right out at you is that you can bring up a game with coach and he'll not only probably remember the weather that day or what he was wearing, but right down to the third play from scrimmage in the second quarter. As vividly as I would call it on the radio live, coach can almost recall those details of games that are either 30 years ago that he coached, or maybe reach back even further, 40 and 50 years ago, in which he played. Not to mention his awareness of all that also has gone on in the sport since. And he probably maybe have that recall of a game that maybe he watched on TV casually, strolling through the restaurant or whatever, but it's probably pretty darn near close. And so when you're around a man like him that already has the institutional knowledge of the game as a player and a coach, but has the mental ability, that kind of a recall, photographic memory, whatever you want to call it, it immediately makes you nod your head like, yes, this is why he's one of the greats. And so you're right about the alma mater aspect of this. I think that, and Buddy, you're going to have to tell me this because I don't know the history yet of the move, but whomever and the moment or the conversation of, hey, coach, would you come back to Gainesville? We're going to name the field after you, and we'd like you to be an ambassador. And oh, by the way, for the folks who don't know, coach is here almost every day down the hall. Now, some days it might be an hour, some days it might be 6, but this is not some decorative title of ambassador. The man is doing the job. And so that is a luxury that this program has that few others in this country will be able to experience.
I agree with you. I think it was a separate deal, as I recall, but my memory's not that good. I think they named the stadium and then they brought it back. Jeremy Fuller would be the key guy that did that. That was his project. But yeah, it's awesome. All good. It's like a fairy tale. So talking about coaches, you mentioned a very important point about people who are there when you're talking to them and they're listening to what you say. And that's a quality that I have seen and heard and like about Billy Napier. Someone said the other day, I forget who it was, said it isn't like when you're talking to him, he's looking over your shoulder at the next guy. He's looking at you and talking to you. He's attentive. And that's something I like about him. Talk to me about Billy Napier, the qualities you like about him, and the questions that you have.
I think it starts with, his rearing. There's an old term. He's the son of a coach. We talk about it with players, and the conversation holds for coaches too. Sons of coaches who go on into the profession themselves have something that is uniquely their own. It's in their DNA. And so the thing that strikes me about Billy Napier is that, and I watched a lot of this kind of from 2 hours away, living in Madisonville, Louisiana, and he's over in Lafayette. He's a process guy, which I can appreciate. And most of these guys that are running these programs are that. But in particular, there is a process that involves a patience with him and a real strict attention to detail. And at the same time, he doesn't get lost in that. It's not robotic. It's very human and one-on-one. And that's hard to do when you have the size staff that he does. You have over 100 football players in camp at the college level. All those things are tough. Every day after practice, he is engaging his players in a way that he wants them to have the personal connection with each other that you and I are talking about Billy having with folks in the community or in this building. So, for example, Buddy, will you stand up, please? Yes. Buddy, somebody has to say his name, and Buddy's from Ocala, Florida. So
I like that.
Yeah, that's yes. So that's important to him. And you're right. When you're in his office, you're in his presence, again, he's protective of his time, and he is strict with his schedule. So you may not get that one-on-one with him when you like, but when you do, he's fully engaged. And I think that goes to his process in developing players too. I think that when we look at what will be important for him, especially here in the first, let's say, 2 years at Florida, he's gonna have to take some of the blueprint from Louisiana of developing the players that he is inheriting or already has, taking the players that he's able to bring in, develop them further than perhaps those of out there that project these things, further than that, and then mix in the resources of being here in Gainesville and be able to either attract better players with the resources he has and go that route. So that mix, I think, will serve him well, and I think that's probably why he's a very good fit for this job. And at some point here, I'm going to be eager to talk to him about why Florida was a good fit for him too. Because, buddy, I think you and I both know that, let's say it's been, we'll call it 8 months since his hire, roughly 8 or 9 months. He probably could have made a jump away from Louisiana a year prior to when he came here to Gainesville. I think that he knew what he had at UL, and it was going to be special, and certainly it was, and that allowed him to be choosy about where his next move would be, and so that's how the marriage between Florida and Billy Napier happens.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's so accurate, and people I've talked to in Louisiana that you know well, the same person who told me, "You guys got Sean Kelley? Boy, you really are lucky out there." He also told me 2 days before he took the job, Matt Moscona said people in Louisiana are really nervous about Florida hiring Billy Napier, and some people from LSU would like to see him going to Baton Rouge. And then he told me about Billy's background. I knew a little bit about it, highly regarded, and you can put whatever number you want to on it, but rumors of anywhere from 3 to 4 opportunities to leave there to a Power 5 and SEC team, which he didn't take. So I'm intrigued to see if he's brought this whole package now, including his Army, to Gainesville. He's done everything pretty much right. We need to see if he can coach, and we're all confident he probably can, but we haven't seen it yet. Now we get to see that against a top 10 team in Utah, and I can't remember a more difficult opening game in my time than this, because not just for the fact that they're ranked 8th in the country by one poll, but because it's such an important game to win overall for his program, for the record, and could play a big part in the success of this team all year. So I think it's really critical, and I think we're going to find out a lot about Billy Napier soon.
Yeah, I think so too. And buddy, I'll lean on you as the historian here. Some of the guys here in the office with me this morning, we've been kind of kicking around trying to remember, or at least figure out, when the last time Florida opened at home as an underdog.
Yeah, I wouldn't know.
Opened
that,
at home,
but,
not neutral site, but opened at home.
Yeah, that's a good question. And when you find out, let me know. I don't know.
Yeah.
One thing I may have seen it. I don't remember it all that well, but I can tell you I've seen a lot of opening games. I just don't remember one. I mean, the Oklahoma State game was huge for Spurrier because it's his first game, but I think they were underdog. They were favored in that game. So I don't know. I'd love to find out about that for sure.
We're gonna work on that. But what you said about the opponent is that if Billy and the Gators lose the game to Utah, I think we'll all be disappointed. We want our team to win, and we want him off to a good start. I don't think it inflicts big damage unless the performance is such that it affects the next week. That's the danger there, I guess, in opening with Utah. The upside, though, is tremendously different in that if Florida uses this building that I'm sitting in to their advantage and knocks off Utah in week 1, you're a top 25 team.
Huge.
And you're riding tremendous momentum, not to mention the national exposure, not to mention the continued grace period honeymoon that a new head coach would get. And then you're feeling pretty good about week 2 in Kentucky. So I would caution to say, let's not be overly dramatic about one
One way or the
side
other.
versus the other. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have a saying around here. Some of us kind of got burnt because we thought Dan Mullen was the guy. And a lot of people did. Coach Spurrier told me he'll break my record here before he leaves here. We all thought he was on his way to these lofty heights with Spurrier and Meyer, whatever. And something happened. I don't know what. It cratered, and Dan Mullen wound up leaving. So, a motto of my group, my show is, "Don't fall in love on the first date." Let's wait and see what this guy is all about. As much as I like him a lot, that is what our mantra is. Don't fall in love on the first date. Hoping for the best, but you never know. Now,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, but at the same time, also don't tear up the phone number, or to use the younger generation, I guess it's swipe left. Don't swipe left on this either. So if it doesn't go well in week one, don't don't punch a hole in the bottom of the boat either. So
that's good advice.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. All right, so I got to get back to broadcasting here for a couple because I got some people I want to mention also, and I want to get a little bit in your background because about your growing up years and you're a Saluki and and it seems like we have an affinity for getting guys in the Midwest to come here to broadcast games, which is not a bad thing, by the way. So tell me a little bit about your first, how you got into the business. What you were thinking when you got into it, and whether it exceeded your expectations, or what it was. You had a dream job already, lead announcer, college football, ESPN. Talk to me about that.
Well, it was interesting during the process, which moved rather quickly. I was often asked, so why do you want to leave ESPN? And my answer was, I don't. I don't want to leave ESPN. It's going very well. I broadcast at these iconic venues, and most every game that I do, whether it be college football or NBA or major, they're all big games. ESPN Radio is trying to find the best game for a national audience, and so all those things were great, and I worked for great people. And I was in negotiations for my next ESPN contract, but there's always been this pull, whether it goes back to, as we mentioned, growing up in St. Louis, or why I got into this business, which was to be the voice of a Division I school. It took a hard turn with the NBA, but I was still that team's announcer. My whole career, other than the ESPN phase, has been with a team or a university. I missed being a part of the journey, being a part of a community, all those things. Did it outweigh the national stuff? Not necessarily, but let's remember what Florida is. It is, in my estimation, a top 5 university and athletic program in this country. This is not a typical college level, I guess, job, if you're looking at it from a broadcast standpoint. Great community. I love the fact that Billy Napier was hired. The athletic director and Scott Strickland also had a big play in this. And it was also a situation, buddy, where for me, at my age and everything else, not that I can give them 33 years like Mick Hubert did. Maybe I can. We'll see how modern medical science is in 30-some years. But this is a place that I want to be for a long, long time. And if I can make sure that I don't screw this up in some way, I retire here, whatever. Be a part of something for the long term. So that's important to me. But going back earlier, I kind of alluded to it. I grew up in that town and had aspirations. And then I went off to college, buddy, and I for some reason, I pretended that I was going to be a finance major. That lasted one semester, okay? So I just finally listened to my heart. I ended up landing in Carbondale, Illinois, and I wanted to learn under a guy named Mike Reese, who still to this day is the voice of the Salukis. And from there, and be a part of that family tree. It's strange. My first play-by-play job was as a student at SIU. I somehow was asked to be the women's basketball radio announcer, and that was my first exposure and experience of what's it like to travel with a team, albeit busing everywhere, to know your role, to kind of learn how to act a little bit. The SID was my partner. For those who don't know, SID is a sports information director or the PR person for the team. So I had great people around me and were willing to bring me up. And ever since then, buddy, I have made it a priority. It's of the utmost importance for me to always remember that I'm still learning, that I can always be better, and I need to have mentors at each level of my career. So, whether it was Mike Reese at the start, or Mike Kelley when I worked in Columbia, Missouri, or Jim Henderson when I was in New Orleans, the longtime iconic voice of the New Orleans Saints, or as I got into doing more network stuff, guys like Ian Eagle and Kenny Albert and Brian Anderson, and so those folks have been kind enough, and I hope I've respected it enough to where I lean on them as far as the getting better, um, honing the craft, all those things, the little cliche things that you might say about you know staying and maintaining in the business.
Well said, and I should add one more. I know it's true is giving others a helping hand up and being there for others. I know in Bob Belvano's case, who he talked about, you saved his life. I know you're the kind of guy that likes to help other people, which is a good quality. I just hope you'll help my friend Shane Matthews. He needs a lot of help. Okay, I'm
Well,
only kidding, of course.
it's funny you say that because when I was at ESPN Radio, my partner there was Barrett Jones, who three-time All-American lineman at Alabama. Um, you mentioned Bob Valvano as my college basketball partner at ESPN Radio. PJ Colissimo was my longtime NBA partner, and now I've got Shane. So, buddy, I've got this streak that I like to keep alive that I am not the smartest man in the booth. So Shane will make sure that legacy continues. That I will not be the smartest man in the booth.
Shane's a good dude, as you know, and I do a show with him every week. All right, so now I'm going to read these names, and I'm going to just get your reaction to them. You'll know where I'm going. And then I got a suggestion for you you talk about not wanting to have a trademark phrase. I got one for you. All right.
Okay.
All right. Here you go. Larry Munson, John Ward, Bill Anderson, John Ferguson, Eli Gold, John Forney, Jim Fife,
Wow.
and Mick Hubert.
Yeah. We're talking about the Giants, really. And it all revolves around the traditions that we have in this conference. All of them with tenure, all of them with their own personalities. Some of the quirks live in infamy. You mentioned Larry Munson. I mean, I'd be hard pressed to not find somebody in our business who doesn't attempt to do a Larry Munson impression at some point. Mick has the iconic moments of 3 championship seasons, the phrase "Oh my," the Doring call. This goes back to what we were talking about earlier. This is a connection thing, and I'm a little overwhelmed and humbled that, not to say that I will ever be mentioned in that same conversation, but when you name the names that you just did, or name the influences that I've had in my career, you start to kind of almost feel the weight of that responsibility with regard to the place in the culture that we have. So I still believe the play on the field and the players and the coaches are the story.
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't ever want to be the story. That's a problem. But I also need to probably come to grips with or learn how to manage that. Over time, players come and go, coaches come and go, and a lot of those men that you mentioned, they're the constant with the fan base, almost as much as the logo, which can change as well. So you have to respect that responsibility and I guess find the right way to handle it.
In the final minute we have, let's talk about Ben Scully.
Okay.
I mean, my goodness, he is the consummate guy. And if you've ever been to the ball game at Dodger Stadium, I went to Chavez Ravine in the 60s, late 60s, and I sat in those stands. and I listened to the game on the radio from the fans. They all had transistors radios. They were all listening to Vin. If Vin didn't say it, it didn't happen. Well, what a giant, and what a great run he had. And I didn't know him personally, but what a gentleman.
Gracious beyond compare, the ultimate storyteller, the feel of the everyman, I think, is what Old Red would want you to know about him. And how many franchises can we say that their fan base, when selecting their Mount Rushmore, have the broadcaster there? It's not supposed to be that way, but for the Los Angeles Dodgers, it is. And you go back to this role of being an ambassador, or someone who transcends the local market to be a national presence. Vin Scully's the guy. There are others in the club, but the president of the club was Vin Scully. And I'm saying that as a Jack Buck guy, but Vin was just a little bit different. And I don't know if it's because of the tenure or the tenor of his voice. Take your pick. But look, we've lost a legend. And even he tried to do some social media at the end too, which was awfully entertaining. And I'm glad that he did in the short time that we had him beyond his broadcast career.
Sean Kelley, no pressure on you. Now all you have to do is become the Ben Scully for the Florida Gators, and you're good.
Buddy, I'm not even going to attempt that. I'll just try to do the best I can. How about that?
All right, so here's my corny suggestion. You can see right away it's fake, okay? Obviously, you're going to have your own call, and you're not going to make it up. And we kid make about his oh my. So I'll play a card game called Oh Hell, okay? And Terry Bradshaw and I play it, and my family plays it. Terry says it's the greatest game in the history of cards, and we played it for many hours. So I'm thinking, okay, when things go bad, never mind oh my, say oh hell. I don't think it'll work. Sorry.
The last thing I need is to get called into a meeting after September 3rd. And not to say that things aren't going to go right, but there's a phrase that it's funny that I mentioned my broadcast partner with women's basketball at SIU, Gene Green's his name. He used to tease me. He said, this needs to be your catchphrase. And I can't even say it.
Be careful.
It's along the lines of, you've got to be kidding me, but using a different word, right?
Yeah.
Right. And so over the years, I've texted with him, called him back and forth, like, boy, last night would have been the perfect time to use that phrase. And I've always threatened that I would use it at some point, and he would always remind me that you can do it, but it'll probably be your last broadcast as well.
We want you to get started before you get fired, okay?
That's right. That's right.
Hey, it's been great talking to you, Shauna. I wish you all the luck in the world. I'll be listening to you. I'll be running into you from time to time. Loved having you on. Hope we can do it again one day soon. And looking forward to the new voice of the Florida Gators.
Buddy, thanks. It was an honor to say the least. I look forward to our next visit.
Thanks. Well, there you have it. What do you think? We'll see. I have a feeling you're going to like it. As we wrap up tonight, I want to be sure to tell you about a couple of things. First of all, these people who were kind enough to sponsor the Green Room here on the Buddy Martin Show. My friends over there are our bank. They pride themselves on courteous service, and go by and see them in downtown Ocala, where you take care of all your needs for business, which I do, and I love going in that bank because they're about customer service. Jenny and Joe and the whole team down there. So Main Street Community Bank of Ocala sponsors the Green Room of the Buddy Martin Show, where you've heard the voice of the Florida Gators, and hopefully we'll be hearing him again. I want to tell you about a couple other things before we wrap it up. You see the banner going up there. Don't forget to like the page. It helps us a lot if you do. And I want to tell you also about our Orange and Blue Bloods. It's a program that I'm behind and formulating as we go. You'll hear more about it. I talked about it tonight to the Fighting Gators Touchdown Club. And it's really simply just stepping up and taking your pledge again, like you would renew your vows in marriage, or you go to church and renew your profession of faith, whatever. if you really believe the phrase in all kinds of weather and you think that you'll be one of those 1% of 1%, then you need to state your purpose. So we have that pledge for you, which we'll have in a couple of days next week, and we'll talk about that. And you will be an official orange and blue blood. And people say, well, what is it? What is it? Well, you know what? When you renew your vows, there's no set of rules for that. You don't hand you a piece of paper and say, here, do this. You do what you think you ought to do. Someone's got to be caring about college football, which I still say belongs to the fans. The fans can't take it back all at once. They can't be a revolution. But one person at a time at one school, you can step up and say, this is my pledge. And I support the boys and girls from North Florida. Doesn't mean you can't get mad at them or boo them if you want to. Whatever. The bottom line is you support them. It's like family. You get mad at family too. So be ready to hear it. I'll be with next week. We'll have some ideas and thoughts for you at Orange and Blue Bloods. Also, go to buddytowers.com and find out about this. This is what I've been doing, folks, for a while now, and I'm really liking it. I'm the farmer now, and I have this grow tower there it is, the big picture, in my office next door. It's water. It grows. So that's before it started growing. You don't see it now. It's just a big old bunch of leaves over there, and we eat them out straight off the vine, off the grow tower, and with something like a hamburger patty or whatever, or chicken breast, and it is delicious. You go right to your table. I'll show you the latest creation of mine, which I'm very proud of. This is what it looks like when I do it. There's greens off my grow tower, everybody's tower, and we put a nice looking piece of meat, which is green-wise in this case, from Publix, the hamburger patties. So that's good stuff, and it's healthy, and I feel good about the fact I can grow some of my own food. That's the thing I love about it. So want to know more about it, you can DM me, or you can check that out. Go to buddytower.com and find out more about it, how it works, what it is, etc. Some people already started signing up. And I want to share with you this information about psoriasis. The folks over at Red Star Medical Research are a good bunch of people. They're always looking for ways to take care of our community. I've got a clinical trial going on psoriasis. Now, that's a serious problem to a lot of people. If you will know more about this clinical trial and maybe become a part of it, maybe even get investigational medicine, which you can't get anyplace else, you can get online at redstar.net. You must be 18 to 75, be diagnosed with plaque-type psoriasis, not have any other major skin conditions, and you get to see a dermatologist at no cost. You also have access to that medication I told you about, and you receive pay for your time of travel. So it's a good deal. You can call them at 352-629-5800, 352-629-5800 to find out more about this clinical trial. They've done lots of these studies, hundreds, 600-700 of these trials. They continue to do it. Go to RedStar. Red Star Medical Research, seeking tomorrow's answers to the health questions of today. Okay, let's see here. Let's wrap this thing up for the evening. We thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. We'll be off the weekend as always. We'll have more information. Don't forget Gator Bait. Yeah, don't forget Gator Bait. This is what we do, and we appreciate the support of you people. If you're not a member, you need to go to GatorBaitMedia.com and sign up. I mean, just getting France Beard's column alone is worth the price of admission. Plus, we've got some terrific pieces coming up. One by Lauren Meadows this week on the coaching staff. Did a really great job on that. We got that going on. We have more information on the Heavener Complex. And I'll have my column on the guy you just heard from. And I think Sean is going to be a real good fit here. He gets it, right? Sean Kelley does sound like a guy that ought to be doing Notre Dame's play-by-play, doesn't it, Sean Kelley? So we'll wrap it up. We thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll have more information on the Orange and Blue Bloods soon. And we'll catch you up Monday on the Buddy Martin Show right here on this channel. Tell your friends and neighbors.